Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how Keir Starmer and Labour seem to have trapped Rishi Sunak into splitting the Tory party even more as a result on the focus on housing this week. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, Keir Starmer was talking about Labour's housing policies this week. He was quite clear about what they were, so much so that it really needed a response from Rishi Sunak. When you look at the top issues of concern to voters, housing, it's on the list. It's not really near the top. It's never really near the top. But it is very important to a lot of swing voters. Now, these may be voters who are struggling to get on the housing ladder, maybe struggling to find affordable rental accommodation. They may be homeowners whose children or grandchildren are having these problems. And the issue is much more straightforward for Labour. The voters they're targeting want more availability and, by and large, lower costs. For the Conservatives, it's a little trickier, though. When the Conservatives first took over, George Osborne famously told his Liberal Democrat colleagues in coalition that he wasn't really about the house building because it upsets their voters. Their voters tend to be homeowners, and a shortage of housing increases the value of that home. It is their main asset. So the Conservatives simply allowed new builds, especially of affordable homes, to become a bit of a distant memory. But there now exists a serious proportion of the voting population who are much more on the side of wanting houses built because they don't have one. So much so that even the Conservatives have recognised that they need to do something, or at least some of them have. The government tried setting house building targets for councils. They even promised it in the manifesto. But when it came time to it, a load of Tory councillors bent the ears of their MPs, and then those Tory MPs threatened to vote against the plans when Rishi Sunak, who'd just become Prime Minister last autumn, wanted to push them through. So the targets have been abandoned. Starmer has now said that the targets need to be properly re-established and set out a series of other measures that his government would bring in to address the housing crisis. Interestingly, it contained a couple of what I would have thought were fairly controversial statements. First, that Labour would allow building on the green belt under certain conditions, but also that Starmer hopes that Labour's housing policies would actually bring the cost of houses down. Now, that is definitely not what homeowners want. But Starmer is not given for... He doesn't really say things unless he's sure it's the right thing to do so. In fact, some people have been a little bit annoyed by a bit of prevarication or saying certain things. So I can't imagine that he's said this unless the polling has said, yeah, absolutely say this. So I'm guessing that enough people that Labour are targeting are absolutely sick of the inaccessibility of housing or the rental market, and that some deflation is needed. And it certainly attracted attention. It has also required a response from Sunak. He had to abandon his targets last year because Tory rebels threatened to sink them anyway. He could not and still cannot afford to suffer a defeat at the hands of his own MPs. But there are a lot of Tory MPs who want more houses built. This is one of those classic Tory battles that sort of splits them apart. There are some in whose interests it's like, no, we don't want these targets, like the NIMBY MPs, and there are some it's like, no, we need more houses built. And it was said that Europe was the issue which split the Conservative Party. I mean, it still is, of course, but housing does now as well. But Sunak needed to respond to Labour's policies, that the policies aren't vague, so he needed to be clear on his own. And he's, as you can predict, been asked about this, and journalists are now reporting on it. So Sunak is saying he's against targets for councils. It's like, yeah, we know you abandoned them because your rebels were going to stop them anyway. And he says he's against building on the green belt. Okay. He thinks this allows him to draw a distinction with Starmer's Labour. Fine. The only problem is he's not offering up an alternative. People want more houses built. All Sunak is doing is saying what he doesn't want to happen. He's not saying what he does want to happen. How is he going to encourage more houses to be built? Tory MPs and commentators talk about cutting red tape, but it's a meaningless statement that they always retreat to when something isn't working. Oh, something isn't working. It must be the red tape. Let's cut the red tape. What are their specific proposals? The most important issues to voters are healthcare and the cost of living, and by extension, the economy. It's hard to draw a distinction there. Obviously, the difference in policies between Labour and the Conservatives is night and day, but people don't really focus on the policies but the aims. It's why the Tories keep getting away with promising great results without a plan to back them up. In terms of aims, both Labour and the Conservatives make the same claims. They both say they want economic growth, higher wages, lower costs. Only one of them delivers it. Same with healthcare. They both claim they want people to have quick and effective treatment. Again, only one delivers it, but they both claim it. But housing's one of those policy areas where the Conservatives cannot even claim the same aims as Labour. This isn't Sunak trying to draw a distinction with Starmer. This is Starmer drawing a distinction with Sunak. If the issue of housing takes hold in the national debate, and the media seem to like talking about it, then Sunak is going to need a policy. All he has now are anti-policies. We won't do this and we won't do that. Well, what will you do? Don't know. Aren't you the government? Yeah. Haven't you been in government for 13 and a half years? 13 years. Yeah. And this is because as soon as he says what he will do, a significant number of his own MPs will not like it. Whatever position he adopts will meet resistance from within his own party. This is a wedge issue. And it's almost like Rishi Sunak hasn't actually thought it through. See, he abandoned his plans for targets in the face of opposition half a year ago. And you go, okay, he couldn't face the rebellion. We understand that. Okay, that's politics. Shouldn't he have thought about it, though? Shouldn't he have realised that this issue was going to come up at some point and think, right, when it does come up, what are we going to go with? Because Labour have now started talking about housing policy. Why didn't Sunak or his advisors see this coming and work out how they were going to deal with it? My suspicion is he's spending all of his time putting out fires within his party. I said a while ago, the self-inflicted crises that were going to keep coming, that were predictably going to keep coming, that his party keeps creating for itself, will constantly keep his attention on the short term, making it all but impossible to consider coherent long-term planning. And I wonder if this is what's happening. And because he hasn't thought about it in advance, he's now finding a new trip hazard. See, Michael Gove, this is Sunak's own cabinet minister for housing. Michael Gove has said he's not opposed to building on the green belt under certain conditions. So Sunak's own housing minister has a position aligned with the leader of the opposition, not his own. That is a suggestion that they're not really talking about this at the top level. Liz Truss has piped up. She and her posse are saying that Sunak needs to re-adopt those targets, a position also at odds with government position. Rishi Sunak, not for the first time, has allowed a vacuum to appear in his own government's policy. And so politicians with ideas, whether they're good or bad, are more than happy to fill that vacuum with their own policies. And the media are happy to talk about those ideas. We've already seen this week that Labour has been capturing the narrative in general terms. The policy on letting EU citizens who've settled and been resident in the UK for years being allowed to vote in general elections, lowering the voting age for the same thing, detailed policies on housing, or house building in this case. The Tories have been distracted by their loony convention, which none of the sane ones want the public looking at. I saw there was a Tory strategist tweeting earlier this week saying about the conference and, people don't even know what's going on. It's a Westminster bubble story. Like, no, mate, you're just hoping it is. But if people were going to pay attention to politics this week, if people going, I'm interested in politics, let's read some politics this week, what are they going to be able to read about? What did they have a choice of? They had a choice of Labour announcing their policies or the Tory extremists announcing theirs at that conference. What was there from Rishi Sunak? What was there to fill the void? Nothing, other than what he doesn't want to do. And housing's a real banana skin for him. It not only splits the Conservatives, if you pardon the pun, but the housing targets which he backed, they were a manifesto promise. So he abandoned a manifesto promise. So once he's worked out a housing policy that doesn't annoy too many in his party, and it's clear he hasn't done so yet, then Labour will simply be able to say that he can't be trusted to deliver it because he refused to deliver the last promise. He was going ahead with it. Everyone knew he was going ahead with it. Rishi Sunak didn't pull it because he thought, oh no, this isn't the right thing. He pulled it because his rebels wouldn't let him go ahead with it. In fact, so hazardous is this for Sunak. I am in two minds as to whether Labour actually just promoted these policies this week because it was part of their plan, or because they knew it would cause problems for Sunak, divide his party at just the time when the duct tape holding the cracks is falling off, because Sunak is basically trapped. Say nothing and he has no policy. Say something and he pisses off some Tory MPs. Say something that's different to the manifesto promise and he's broken the manifesto promise. What does he do? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.